region of very cold air that forms in the northern hemisphere over the Arctic in wintertime. The reason it's so cold is that this is a region that gets no sunlight at all for the entire winter. A similar vortex forms in the southern hemisphere in their winter. The polar vortex is normally a distorted donut of cold around the poles. It more or less forms a circle, though not perfectly. In fact, in the northern hemisphere, it tends to be more distorted than in the southern hemisphere. This movie starts with a fairly normal vortex concentrated mostly over Canada and the Arctic. But quickly, that vortex moves south over eastern North America. And toward the end of the movie, you see that it becomes very elongated with a big purple slash across the entire North Pole, with that pool of cold air now sitting throughout the eastern United States, usually low temperatures down the border. What was unusual here, obviously, is that the jet moved so far southward and brought with it that air. As cold air moves south, it broke records throughout the eastern United States. The place is 40 degrees below normal, and cold air extended as far as the normally warm Gulf of Mexico and northern Florida.
In the warming world that we're experiencing, the far north, the Arctic, is warming roughly twice as rapidly as the mid-latitudes, such as the United States. That means that the temperature difference between the Arctic and the mid-latitudes is shrinking. That temperature difference is what drives what is called the circumpolar vortex. As the temperature difference between the Arctic and the mid-latitudes declines, the polar vortex weakens, and it becomes wavier. The waviness means that there can be increased, larger excursions of cold air southward, that is into the mid-latitudes, and in the other phase of the wave, increased excursions of relatively warmer mid-latitude air into the far north.
In terms of magnitude, we're looking at the southern part of the United States being affected along with the eastern half from the Mississippi on, and we're expecting this just from past experiences with the past two polar vortices. We saw that there was a division in the centroid of the polar vortex, causing the Rossby wavelengths to go further south to the mid-latitudes. So for magnitude, we're looking at a good portion of the United States affected. And here we have a map of deviations from average temperatures in the area during this winter season. And we can see that this will be as extreme as 30 degrees below the average temperature. So for magnitude, we're looking at very cold temperatures and extreme deviations.
The United States, as far as goes, the United States can expect to endure a polar vortex once or twice a year in more regions and at a larger magnitude. And we have just received a tweet from Rush Limbaugh. He says, "Let me tell you something. We use the phrase global warming or climate change in conjunction with this, okay? So for all the doubters out there, stuff it." Thank you for Limbaugh. And in response, Al Roker has tweeted, "For all the doubters who say that the media created the polar vortex from the 1959 AMS Glossary of Meteorology, it has included a picture with a definition of a polar vortex. And again, this is from a textbook in 1959, so clearly this is not just a hype word that the media created."
So there have been two recent occurrences of the polar vortex pushing into the United States in 2013-2014 winter season. From December 6th to December 10th, there was a southward shift deteriorating north polar vortex that caused the jet stream to push southward, bringing with it cold air and freezing temperatures. And from January through April, there were record lows from an Arctic cold front tracking across the United States. So from December 6th to December 10th, this sort of area affected was across the northeastern, southeastern, and the central south United States. There were over 150 daily precipitation records broken, as well as 100 daily snowfall records. There were also a series of power outages, as well as a multitude of canceled flights. So the January through April event was of a much longer duration and over a larger area as well. An example of one of the record cold temperatures is Broston in Georgia made it to -6 degrees, which is 38 degrees below freezing in Georgia. And Chicago, Illinois Illinois got 7 inches of snow, causing O'Hare and Midway airports to cancel 1,200 flights in one day. And the White House Live would like to point out that if you've been hearing that the extreme cold spells, like the one we're having in the United States now, disprove global warming, don't believe it. And in fact, recently, in March, the March Home Heating Emergency Through Transportation Act of 2014 was passed, which allows truckers who are transporting fuel for people to be able to work longer hours, because there was a fear about people needing more fuel to heat their homes in order to live in acceptable temperatures, and it lasts through May 15th, so we've got cold problems lasting at least that long. So this is an example of a snowstorm that happened January 28th in Georgia. You can see that for any of you who are senators who are from the northern states, it doesn't look like much snow, but Atlanta was clearly unprepared, and you see here an example of how a lack of mental preparation can lead to very dire physical problems. So there was only up to 3 inches of snow in Atlanta, but that is a lot more than they usually get. As well, there were 2,300 canceled flights, and motorists became stranded on the roadways for over 20 hours. Christine Reed, the mayor, says that interstate is the responsibility of the state government, not the city. Well, I'm sure the 1,500 people who were in storm-related accidents and the 180 injuries really are impressed by his dedication to keeping the lines federal and state responsibility. There was also a problem because the storm warning only warned the southern half of the state, and snowplows and other integral pieces of equipment were diverted away from the northern part of the state, including Birmingham, and those were areas that also received snow and were thus left without recourse. I guess Alabama counties would also like to point out that the predictions were not exactly what they thought they would be, and no one has any control over that except the Lord. Well, we're not proposing to be able to stop the winter storm. We're proposing to tell people about the winter storm, and I believe that is something that humans can control. The National Guard also got involved, providing food and water to both school buses and other cars who were stranded overnight for over 20 hours. And Nathan Deal would like to point out that he had no control over what private businesses and schools decided to do. But he recently had interviews pointing out that he declined to give advance warning of the storm because of a fear of political repercussions should he cry wolf. So clearly, private versus public is not his real interest here. So there was a repeat of this type of storm in the same general location on February 12th with another snow and ice storm swept in the Carolinas. There's up to 10 inches of snow in Raleigh and Charlotte, and hundreds descended upon Red Cross facilities. 35 National Guard armories opened as shelters for people who were unable to make their way home. There were also power outages for over 729,000 people who were left without electricity. And once again, over 7,000 flights are canceled. Moving further into the season, you can begin to see why this can be such an extended problem. Because in March 17th in Washington, D.C., there was over 7 inches of snow at Reagan National, which is the site where D.C.'s weather is recorded, even though it's a bit out of the city. Dulles Airport actually reported 11.1 inches of snow by the end of that day. Rush Limbaugh again wants to point out that my point is you have a lot of people who are believing that this is as cold as it's ever been. You might think that flies in the face of global warming. Global warming is not climate change, and we folks are causing all of this, you must understand. The hoax continues. Well, considering that there was a total of 16 inches of snow in March in Washington, D.C., which is the highest ever recorded in the United States, it's clear that there is some big changes going on. And government facilities were also closed for at least 3 days. So we have an overall problem here where the affected population was over 200 million people, and the estimated cost of this event was $5 billion. This is a result of lost productivity, higher energy consumption, and a drop in consumer spending. One of the hardest hit industries is airlines, with over 40,000 flights canceled and estimated losses of $1.3 billion. And Bill Nye would like to say that climate change is happening, humans are causing it, and I think this is perhaps the most serious environmental issue facing us. And clearly it's also a very serious economic issue as well.
Okay, so here we have a map of the continental United States, and this blue map that's in the middle is the polar vortex, which migrated from the north down south due to the Rocky Waves that we talked about earlier. We can see that the cooler colors are obviously colder temperatures, and we can expect that they will, or it is completely possible that the polar vortex can descend farther south and farther west to include more of the Midwest and affect these areas as well. As far as our worst case scenario, we believe that the overall GDP of the United States can be reduced as much as $67 billion. This is going to be a 0.5% decrease in GDP, which is huge. And these numbers were factored in from airline losses, plumbing and sewer bursts caused from raising pipes and the like. And also, if this does occur during the holiday season, this is a time when consumers are out and about and without plausible ways to get around on the street. Consumer buying will be incredibly decreased because this is conservative.
So to speak a little bit to mitigation strategies in a situation such as this, we look at Georgia, and even though they did not implement the strategies that they had out in their state of Georgia snow and ice plan, the strategies that they had described in that plan were actually really good ideas. Something other states could do is have similar plans be drafted up and implemented in their own states. Part of it was having private contractors for snow removal to actually utilize their warning. They have 3 to 5 days of warning usually when an event like this occurs. And part of that was winter storm watch, winter storm warnings, as well as ice storm warnings, as well as blizzard watches and blizzard warnings. With all those things actually being utilized, you can get ahead of a situation such as this one. Something else that they did was they utilized their state agencies in a crisis such as this, using their Department of Transportation, their communications, their public works and engineering, firefighting, as well as like emergency services all around. Other things to think about when thinking about snow removal for like mitigation when this type of thing happens is that when we think about the overall cost in like recovery that the nation had to go through, it was around $5 billion. And a lot of states had to do more money, had to pay more money than what they had actually out in their budget because of poor budgeting. So in Ohio, they budgeted $65 million for these types of services, and they ended up using $85 million this past winter. And then in Baltimore, they budgeted $2.3 million, ended up having to pay $4.6 million in the budget. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy in how much they were budgeting and how much money they actually were getting. Also, something that's good to think about is snow plows. So snow removal is a big part of this. Something that you can do to make sure that you don't go over that budget is to actually get ahead of the game when this type of thing happens. Thinking about it in the way that it's about $200 an hour on a large scale to have a snow removal service paid through a private contractor by a city or a state. Do 12 hours a day during, say, a 14-week period over 100 cities. Right there, that's $67 million. If you do over 4 weeks, that's $134 million. Just little things like that, that's an increase in the budget, will actually help out a lot in the long run, where you aren't going to have to be working to do some of the costs of damages that are caused by events like this. Also, the use of administrative services is also very important to think about in these events. Hello. Tweet from Donald Trump. This very expensive global warming bullshit has got to stop. Our planet is freezing, record low temperatures, and our global warming scientists are stuck in ice. Interesting. And then we also have this from Bill Gates. Before the economic downturn, attitudes in the U.S. about climate change had become quite enlightened, and there was a big reversal, which I believe was a result of people's worries about their immediate economic situation. Oh, that's strange how Bill's tweet there really, comments on some of what we should guess is Donald's own thoughts on the situation. Very much so is that this kind of stuff is happening, and a lot of people aren't doing things about it because it costs money to be ahead of things, but it's going to cost a lot more money to deal with them after they're done. Evacuation and relocation. West and actually south is probably the best in a situation where it is coming from the northern polar cap. And if you're unable to evacuate, it's also important to have an emergency kit in the home. And also to take precautions to make sure the pipes don't freeze and ice dams don't build on the roof of your home. And then resources needed, snow removal, like plows from private companies and public institutions that remove the snow on highways and roads, around public buildings like hospitals and schools and such. Correct budgeting, as well as federal support from the National Guard, funding action and utilization of our warning systems.
So, this data that we use in this presentation is meant to improve policymaking in the current climate, and we hope that's what we've been able to do. And a final tweet from Stephen Hawking, who says that we are learning how human activities and technologies are affecting climate systems in ways that may forever change life on Earth. As citizens of the world, we have a duty to share that knowledge. We have a duty, and we hope that we discharge that duty to you.